The floorboards inside cabin 28 were slick, with something thick, dark, and still warm. 3 bodies lay meticulously posed on the living room floor, surrounded by the quiet hum of a Northern California forest. But the eyes of anyone entering that room wouldn't stay on the blood. They would drift down the dark hallway toward the back bedroom. Inside that room, 3 young boys were breathing quietly in the dark. They were alive. They were completely untouched. Sometime before dawn, while those 3 boys lay in the deep stillness of sleep, 12-year-old Tina was dragged out of her bed. The killers carried her past the staged bodies of her mother and brother and out into the freezing night air. The other children were left behind on purpose. The killers knew they were in that room. They stepped past their door. They left them in the dark with what remained of their family, confident that none of them would make a sound. 2 doors down, inside cabin 26, the wood stove began to burn something long after midnight, casting a low orange flicker against the trees. The back door did not show signs of forced entry. It simply clicked open. By 10:30 p.m., Sue Sharp was on the couch in her robe. Down in the unfinished basement, her 15-year-old son John and his friend Dana had just slipped inside after hitchhiking back from town, trying not to wake the house. The forest outside was dead silent. When the stairs began to creak, the boys rushed up to help. They walked straight into a trap. Electrical cords and medical tape were already waiting. John's throat was cut. Dana was choked until his breathing stopped. But the timeline of that night contains a terrifying stretch of empty space. The violence was slow. Before Sue was killed, she was forced to walk. The footprints show she was led directly through the growing pools of her own son's blood. She was made to look at them. The footprints just stopped, right where the blade went through her throat. And then, the heavy footsteps turned back toward the hallway, toward the children who were still breathing. The slaughter was over, but the killers stayed inside the dark cabin. They took their time. They carefully moved the 3 heavy shapes on the floor, arranging them into a specific geometric pattern before covering them loosely with a blanket. Then, they walked into the bedroom where 12-year-old Tina lay waiting. At 8 a.m. the next morning, 14-year-old Sheila Sharp walked through the front door to grab a curling iron before church. The air inside was heavy, smelling metallic and sweet. Her brother John was unrecognizable. When a neighbor boy rushed in to help, he bypassed the bodies, stepped over the dark puddles, and checked the back bedroom. There, Rick, Greg, and Justin were staring blankly into the room, awake. But Tina's bed was cold. If you are listening to this in the dark, make sure you are subscribed to KBS. Turn on notifications so you are there when the next piece of evidence surfaces. Outside, as the first police cars arrived, the neighborhood was already watching. In a cluster of cabins built almost on top of one another, the killer didn't need to flee into the mountains. They were likely standing at the window next door, watching the flashlights move across the crime scene. Inside cabin 26, Martin Smart was replacing a hammer that had disappeared from his tools that morning. His marriage was falling apart. Sue Sharp had been telling his wife to pack her bags and leave him. Hours after the slaughter, Martin sat at his desk and wrote a love letter to his estranged wife. One sentence on the page stopped the investigation in its tracks. "I've paid the price of your love, and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives." 4 lives, but the police had only found 3 bodies. In cabin 28. Shortly after, Martin checked into a hospital and admitted to a counselor that he had killed Sue and Tina, but he was precise about his denials. He swore he never touched the 2 boys. He spoke as if someone else had been holding the other hammer. The counselor called the feds. The tapes vanished. The report was filed away. Nobody ever knocked on his door. For 3 years, the canyon 60 miles away kept its mouth shut. Then, a hiker kicked over a fragment of a human skull. It belonged to Tina Sharp. Before the forensic team could even confirm the identity, a call came into the sheriff's tip line. The voice on the recording was calm. The anonymous caller asked if the state had finally found the missing girl from Keddie. The tape of that voice was quietly locked inside a storage evidence room. It sat in the dark for over 30 years. The wood of cabin 28 has since been torn down. The men from Cabin 26 took the layout of that night to their graves, but 6 people who were there that night are still alive today, scattered across the country, carrying the exact memory of the footsteps in the hallway. The question that remains isn't who opened the back door, it's why 3 boys were left to listen to the silence.